Hi, this is Garry Harrington from Rum Village Nature Center. I work at the Nature Center as a naturalist, teaching people about nature and wildlife. And today I'm going to talk about some animals that live in our area. And these animals are mammals, animals that most of us are probably familiar with. There are certain things that make a mammal, just like there are certain things that make, for example, a bird a bird. We know a bird instantly because of the fact that they fly and have feathers. We know reptiles because reptiles have scales on the outside of their skin. There are certain things that make a mammal a mammal. For example, they have fur on the outside of their body, not feathers or skin, like reptiles do in the form of scales. They also give birth to live young. They are warm-blooded, and the mother feeds them milk, not unlike a mom and kittens. So they're nourished by milk, by the mother. So those are some of the characteristics that make a mammal a mammal. We've really got some cool mammals that live in our area, and they kind of get overlooked because we look at animals that live on the other side of the planet, we kind of forget what's right here in our backyard. And so at Rum Village, we try to focus on the animals that we're familiar with that live right here in our community. And I'm going to start with what is now the largest mammal in the state of Indiana. And I have an example of one in the form of the skin right here. And so this is the skin of a white-tailed deer. White-tailed deer are now the biggest mammals. Probably 200 years ago or so, the biggest mammal was a buffalo living in the state of Indiana. Unfortunately, we have no buffalo in Indiana. They all live out west now. But this is the skin of a white-tailed deer that, who knows, maybe it was over 200 pounds. They can get to over 200 pounds. And white-tailed deer now are plentiful in the state of Indiana. At one time, they're actually gone from the state, believe it or not. It's hard to believe white-tailed deer not being here, but that was the case in the 1930s. So this is white-tailed deer, and you can tell, actually, this is the coloration that they have in the middle of the cold weather. This is the fur color that they have in fall and going into wintertime. It's a very dark brown color. They kind of change colors. In the summertime, they're more reddish color. But white-tailed deer definitely found throughout the state of Indiana, a lot around Rum Village, actually, and right on the outskirts of downtown South Bend. Let's take a look at a picture of one. This is a buck, by the way. And we can tell it's a buck because it has antlers. And one thing that makes an antler and not a horn is the fact that antlers are shed every year. So things like goats have horns. We know that animals like cows have horns, and they're on their bodies permanently. Antlers are shed every year and regrown. I've got a couple of really good examples right here, and I will show those to you right now. Here we go. So, once in a while, we're at the right place at the right time to find antlers like these. These came from a male, a buck, and what happens is they are shed. They fall to the ground after the mating season, which usually ends in the middle of winter. So these are shed somewhere around, the end of January, somewhere times into February. And if you're at the right place at the right time, you can find them. You have to be in the right place at the right time because these guys are actually highly desirable for rodents. They like to chew on them because they have calcium in them. And actually, we can see a little bit of it right there that's been eaten off. So a rodent of some kind, a mouse, or maybe a squirrel or a chipmunk or something have been chewing on that and getting the calcium out of that. If you were to have this on the ground for a couple weeks, there'd be nothing left. It would all be consumed by rodents. So you have to find these guys early if you can. We were lucky. We found these several years ago right behind the Nature Center. So the males use these to kind of fight each other for the females during the rut season, which is generally in the fall. And so what they do is they will use their their antlers kind of like that. And they will use them to kind of spar with their rivals so they can win the affection of the females, the does. So kind of a cool thing. Let's see, I have something else here. Actually, an example of a foot here. Well, let me tell you this. At Rum Village Nature Center, we do not go out in the woods and shoot animals to get their parts. These parts were either found, they were donated, but we do not harm animals to get their parts at Rum Village. So here is the foot of a deer, and I'm going to hold it up that way, like that. This part of the foot is known as the hoof, and they can kind of open and close that hoof. And actually, when I see tracks out in the woods at Rum Village, be it in the summertime in the mud or in the wintertime during snowy conditions, I can tell when they're moving fast or slow, because if they're moving slow, the hoof is kind of contracted like that. If they are moving fast, they expand it like that on purpose to get better traction so they can really move and get a lot more stability by doing that. So kind of a neat thing, these hooves allow them to get traction and allow them to move quickly when they need to. White-tailed deer can go about 30 miles an hour, if not more than that. So they're very fast animals. An amazing ability. They can, from a dead stop, they can jump, get this, 7 feet straight up in the air. With a running start, they can go 8 feet over a fence. So it's quite amazing they can do that, considering they can weigh over 200 over 200 pounds. All right, let's take a look at one final thing here, and that is their skull, the bones inside their head. So we can tell this deer, eyes were coming right there out of the side. There's the sockets for their eyes. They do have pretty good vision, but not nearly as good as the other senses. They can hear very well, and they have a very good sense of smell. And usually when they're looking to investigate what's around them, they will sniff the air. They will inhale through their nose. Sometimes it's audible. You can hear them doing that, and they're taking in a deep breath to find out what is around. So it's one way of learning about their surroundings. Something else is kind of interesting about the skull. You can see the teeth there. They have all very flat teeth, molar teeth like people have in the back, and those teeth are used for grinding plants. So when we see teeth like that, that tells us instantly, this guy is a vegetarian, it eats plants. What's weird is they don't have teeth in the front. So when a white-tailed deer grabs something to eat, it grabs it with its mouth and just yanks it right off, and then they chew it. And so they don't make a nice clean cut. Like, say, for example, a rabbit that has sharp incisor teeth. I can always tell if it's been a rabbit chewing on something around the nature center or a white-tailed deer, because the deer just yanks it off there and it's not a very clean cut. All right. Actually, I'm going to show you one additional thing, and that is a fawn, baby deer. So at Rum Village, we are fortunate enough to see every year young fawns, and we generally see them right around the first part of June. Mom gives birth at the last part of May, the first part of June. We usually see them in June. And lately we've been seeing not one, but 2 fawns, which means mom's been eating pretty healthily, because when you only see one, it means maybe she's not finding as much food and getting as much nutrients. So the fact that we usually see almost always 2 is a good sign for the health. But these guys are growing very quickly, and very soon they'll be losing all those spots that they have on their body. All right, another interesting animal, an animal that's really made a big comeback in northern Indiana and much of the Midwest. And that happens to be, I've got a skin right here, from a coyote. So coyotes, a couple of things about coyotes. One is people are not on the menu. If we see a coyote, we don't have to freak out. We don't have to panic. When it comes to coyotes, the good thing is they don't eat dogs, cats, or people. Generally speaking, even pets, even small pets are off the menu, so we don't have to worry about that. They're after more than anything, get this, rodents. So they're good at catching mice and rats. In the summertime, half their diet consists of insects and berries. So it's kind of a myth that they're brutal, savage animals that are out to get people or to get our animals. That's not true. Half their diet during the warm weather is plant material, believe it or not. So here's the deal with these guys. I'm going to hold that up there. They stand not very tall, generally, about the size of a medium dog. They average, get this, only 30 pounds. So they're not huge. The wolves can get to be well over 100 pounds. So these guys are kind of medium-sized between a wolf and a fox. So my experience with finding these guys for the first time in our community happened about, 10 or 12 years ago. I was living in the north side of South Bend. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I have my window open. It's the middle of summertime, and suddenly I hear, and I was half asleep and thought, what is that noise? And I thought, could it be the neighbor? Because the neighbor had 3 big dogs, and sometimes they would vocalize at nighttime. And I realized, nope, it's not the neighbor's dogs, it's actually coyotes. And so there's maybe 2 or 3 coyotes in close proximity to my privacy fence. At maybe 150 feet away were 3 coyotes. I didn't panic because I know they're not after me, they're not after my dogs or any pets. They were just communicating with one another to see where each other were. And that was the idea of them vocalizing like that. All right, let's see. Got a picture here. And I'm sure there's a lot of people watching this that have seen coyotes before. Sometimes you might think it's a dog going quickly across the road, especially at nighttime. But chances are, medium-sized, moving quickly at night, it's probably a coyote. And coyotes have made a tremendous comeback. They used to be pretty much wiped out of the state of Indiana. They've slowly worked their way from the west to the east, and now they're found out all over the eastern part of the United States. I believe I have the skull right here of a coyote. And so if we look at its teeth, he's got very sharp teeth, almost like a dog. They are a member of that family. And their teeth are actually known as canine teeth. They have sharp teeth that are made for catching and killing animals and eating animals. Although they do eat plants, and they do eat, as I mentioned before, insects, even right there in the middle of the heart of the warm weather. And they're out there eating insects and eating vegetation as much as they are anything else. They kind of switch gears, as do fox. When the weather gets cold, they begin to eat a lot more rodents than they normally would in the summer. So there's his skull, very much dog-like. Again, not a huge animal, only about 30 pounds average. All right, we'll take a look at another guy here. Here he is. You might be able to guess what it is just by that tail. He's got a big, flat tail. He's got really thick fur. He needs that thick fur because he lives in an aquatic environment. This is a beaver skin. So again, we don't go around shooting and harming animals at Rum Village. We're here to help animals, not hurt them. But this is one that was donated to the Nature Center. And it's just kind of a cool thing because you can see all the hairs that he has there to keep him nice and warm because he's in the water most of the time year-round. So if you're an animal and you're out in the middle of January out swimming, you better have a very thick coat because you're going to freeze to death pretty quickly if you don't. And they do. Mother Nature provides them with a very thick coat, and it's waterproof naturally. They have oils that they secrete and work through their fur that keep them nice and waterproofed. These guys have made a tremendous comeback too. They're now found on the St. Joseph River after being absent for many, many years. So happy to see beaver once again on the St. Joseph River and really throughout St. Joseph County. let's see. Speaking of beaver, here's his picture right there. So beaver, as we know, are vegetarians. We know that they're really good at cutting down trees. Sometimes that can be problematic if they're cutting trees adjacent to wetland areas where we don't want that happening. That's not necessarily a good thing. But we know that when it comes to beaver, they're really good at construction. So they're nature's builders. They can make dams and create wetland environments that benefit all the animals in a community, not just themselves. The fish, the ducks, the ponds, the ducks in the pond, the insects that are around there, all the wetland species benefit from their natural abilities to construct basically wetlands. Speaking of which, here we do have a skull of a beaver. He's got a big flat head. That's one way I can tell a beaver when he's swimming. I can tell it's not a muskrat. I can tell it's not something like, an aquatic animal that might be swimming around there like an otter, because they have a big flat head. And when they get scared, they dive down into the water. But one of the most remarkable things are those teeth. Take a look at his teeth. He's got big orange teeth, and their teeth enable them to take chunks out of trees, to fell those trees, so they can use the branches to construct wetland areas in the form of dams, and they can get food, which they eat, at the very edges of those trees. They don't eat the wood itself. There's not much nutrients in that, but instead they eat the ends of the leaves and the shoots that have a lot of nutrients. But they use those teeth to do that. Their teeth are made so they will grow their whole life. And they have to actually keep munching on things because their teeth can keep growing. It actually can grow from the top of their mouth all the way through the bottom part. And that's happened before, unfortunately, to beaver. But if they keep chewing on things, it kind of whittles them down and actually also automatically sharpens them. Because on the underside of the teeth, where it's white there, the underside of those teeth, that's the softer part. And if I flip it around this way, you can see the harder part on the exterior, and it automatically, as they chew, sharpens those teeth. So automatic sharpening mechanism in the beaver's teeth just by chewing. All right. A little later here, we're going to talk about some other kinds of mammals that are found right here in northern Indiana where we live. So we're going to continue talking about different kinds of mammals that are found in our area. So let's start with one here that is very common in our area, all over South Bend, all over the state of Indiana, all over the Midwest and beyond, actually, and that is a raccoon. Everybody's familiar with a raccoon. Raccoons are, for the most part, nocturnal. So they come out at night, usually when we're asleep. Sometimes we wake up and find the evidence of these guys the next day. But if you see one at dusk or at dawn, you might see its tail. And its tail is kind of characteristic in that it has lots and lots of stripes up and down, dark-colored stripes. Its body usually has a black stripe down the middle, and they're kind of gray and whitish color. So this is what the typical raccoon looks like. They're really good survivors. They can eat all kinds of food. They're omnivores, so they can eat plant material and animal material. And they're really good sometimes at Rum Village getting into our trash containers. If people throw their Big Mac in there, a lot of times these are the culprits who make a big mess the next day. So these guys do have sharp teeth, like most predators do. We don't try to touch them. They don't come after us. We leave them alone. They leave us alone, like the universal rule applies. But it's very, very cool seeing these guys out with mom and the babies in the middle of springtime. All right. An animal that's maybe not so much a favorite of a lot of folks, but I happen to like them a lot. You got it, a skunk. Here he is. So skunks generally have a white stripe, although what's weird is sometimes skunks can come in almost an all-white form or almost an all-black form. But generally speaking, yes, they're black with white stripes. And skunks are nocturnal too, so you don't usually see them out in the daytime. That's unusual if you do. They come out at dusk, and they go back to sleep once the sun is coming out. They are often found in burrows. That's where they live, down underneath the ground, and they won't be out again until it's night once again. But one of the things we know about skunks is they're really good at spraying to keep predators at bay. Most animals get the idea from the coloration that this guy is not good to be around. Certainly, animals have really good senses of smell. They know a skunk. Most animals are wary of them. They will not get close to them. But if they should make that mistake, skunks have a very good defense mechanism, don't they? They can spray. So I'm going to do a quick demo here. It's said that a skunk can spray about 15 feet, and they can spray that smell right in the predator's face, or unfortunately, an unwary dog or person. So we're going to test that right now. I'm going to run back and see if you can see this. I'm going to spray this. This is traveling about 15 feet. So if you think you're going to get really close to a skunk, you better think again. Give him plenty of room, give him plenty of distance, and you won't get sprayed. Matter of fact, they will give you a warning, and they will often stomp their feet. I've seen pictures of them literally doing a handstand and advertising their back end saying, hey, if you get too close, you're going to get sprayed. So they'll give you plenty of warning before they do that. So if you get sprayed, you've done something wrong. You got too close. And most people never make that mistake, or a dog or cat would never make that mistake again. All right, we talked a little bit earlier about a predator that we have in our area that made a comeback. Here is another predator. This is actually not a red fox, which is one of the most common foxes that we have. And by the way, the red fox is not native, but this guy is. This is a gray fox. Really a beautiful animal. And again, we don't go around shooting animals at Rum Village. We did not kill this animal to get his skin. Most of the animals that we have, unfortunately, have died of old age or lost their lives on the road. But the gray fox has a really cool ability. It can actually climb up trees like a cat can. So it can escape danger by climbing up a tree, or it can climb up a tree maybe to find a nest that might have eggs in it from a bird. They are predators, so they do have teeth like other kinds of members of their family. They have canine teeth. They have sharp teeth right there in the front. They have grinding teeth in the back. So they can eat plant material and animal material. They don't eat as much plant material as this guy. We learned earlier that this is actually the skull of a coyote, and this is the skull of the fox. Very comparable though, very much similar in structure because they are members of the same general family. All right. Something that we see a lot of at Rum Village is this guy, and you probably see a lot of them in your neighborhood. This happens to be a fox squirrel, and fox squirrels are the most common that we have around South Bend and a lot of northern and central Indiana. The other kind that we frequently see is something that people often say, oh, is that a baby fox? Is that a baby fox squirrel right by your nature center? Maybe out there feeding like this guy is? And the answer is he does look like a baby squirrel, but actually he's another kind of squirrel called a red squirrel. And they are small their whole lives. They never get much bigger than a chipmunk, but they are a different species altogether. So this is yet another kind. We have the fox squirrel, and we have a pine squirrel, also known as a red squirrel. Now, back in the day, we had plenty of these guys in our area. So the story goes, these guys have been away from this part of Indiana for a long time, very prevalent in southern and central Indiana, and this is a gray squirrel. So gray squirrels used to be very common in this area, not so much anymore. They used to be spread throughout the United States. Something like 1 billion gray squirrels lived in the United States at one time. We see the gray squirrel's cousin now. It's just a variant of this guy, and they're making a really big comeback to this area from the east. They're coming from Elkhart County into St. Joseph County. And maybe these guys never were really so prevalent. A black squirrel. It's just very, well, it's the same as this squirrel. The gray squirrel and the black squirrel are the same species, just different color variants. They're called color morphs. One of my favorites happens to be this little guy, and I do mean little. Here he is. Flying squirrels. Do they actually fly? No. But they glide very well. They can jump from one branch to another. They can jump from one tree trunk to another and glide down. And so these guys are pretty common, but yet you'd never know them to be around. Why? Because they come out at night. They're nocturnal. They have really big eyes. They have a kind of disproportionately large eye so they can see predators at nighttime. And they come out at night, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning when you're sound asleep. And sometimes they will visit people's feeders. They don't even know that it's there because these guys are small and they're nocturnal. But flying squirrels definitely live throughout the South Bend area. And just lastly, just to mention it, here is a chipmunk. Most people are familiar with chipmunks. They're small. They look to some people like a baby squirrel. Nope, they're their own kind of animal. Squirrels live high up in trees, and we know that chipmunks live in burrows underneath the ground. So that's one of the things that separate the two. All right, speaking of chipmunks being around underneath the ground, here's another animal that lives subterranean underneath the ground. Everybody should know what a groundhog is. Some people look at a groundhog and think, gosh, he's kind of big and chubby, and he's in my backyard. Could that be a beaver? They kind of do look like a beaver. Beaver's a lot bigger, and remember, they're aquatic. So these guys live in burrows underneath the ground. They're often found, throughout Rum Village and South Bend and throughout the Midwest, actually. So these guys are very, very common, and again, subterranean, and they eat only vegetable matter. They're vegetarians, so they're not going to get you or me or a cat or dog. Just give them a lot of distance. They'll never bite. The only thing I would say is if you see one that will let you get too close, get back, because that is not normal, and maybe that animal's maybe sick or injured. Usually they're very skittish, and just like that, they dive into their burrow before you get anywhere near them. All right, last but not least, one of my favorites, a bat. So here's a model of a bat. This is about the size of something known as a big brown bat. We do have bats that live throughout the state of Indiana. One thing I'll say about bats, and that yes, they are the only flying mammal that we have, so kind of unique to the mammal world for that reason. These guys are in trouble right now because of actually a fungus that affects their face and their nose, and something called white nose syndrome that is wiping out bats throughout a good portion of the United States. And it's a fungus that grows on their noses while they sleep, and it causes them to wake up periodically and use precious reserves, energy reserves, that they have as they hibernate throughout the year. And the poor things wind up starving to death before they ever wake up. So hopefully there'll be a solution for that dilemma for this kind of animal soon, because they're very much worth having around. They're great consumers of insects, so they help to control the insect population. But those are some of the different kinds of mammals that we have in our area. Keep your eyes open for mammals. Just keep a safe distance. You'll never have a problem with them, but you will have fun watching them. So thank you very much.